He's calling you out right now.
Yep. Can't see that on the podcast, but yes, I was pointing it back. Hello and welcome to Rekindling Relationships with Bec and Vern. As well as podcasting, we run relationship workshops for organisations, as well as fun, creative dates to reconnect couples.
We live in Bendigo with our blended family of 4 teenagers and a menagerie of animals. Welcome to our podcast designed to answer all the tricky questions to do with relationships, done in a fun, sometimes a little silly, but hopefully an informative way.
Today we're speaking with Laura Doyle, who is a relationship expert, a best-selling author and a podcaster, and we've both read your book and loved it. It's had a few name changes, so I think it is called The Empowered Wife right now.
Yes, it's The Empowered Wife.
Yep,
yes.
So we've read an older version of that. I'd love to find out about that. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So we've just been having a chat about, the differences about where we live. But I think some of the things we actually probably have in common is with Australia and America is relationships and around the world.
Yes, absolutely. Everywhere around the world, I think everyone wants to be loved and seen and heard and understood and known.
And one thing which I really resonate with, which you speak about, the fact that we don't actually get taught how to do this. We go to school for a long period of time and we learn a lot of different things, but we don't get taught how to build relationships. And as an ex-school teacher, it's one thing that I've always thought was really important is learning how to communicate better and how to build relationships.
The example that's set for us with our parents is pretty mediocre at best, I think. So we're not taught this at school. It's something that everyone wants to do well, but we all struggle to do well.
I sure struggled, that's for sure. And my parents are divorced, so it definitely wasn't the model you want to be following if you want to have a happy marriage, right? And so many of us now, our parents are, right? The divorce rate's very high. So a lot of us grow up with that as our model.
So we don't actually have anyone teaching us these things. And you didn't actually get taught how to be a relationship expert, obviously. You learned through doing, I'm guessing.
Desperation and pain were my teachers.
Yeah.
I did, though, actually seek out the women that had happy relationships that I could find. I was really right on the brink of getting divorced. And I was on the marriage counselor's couch, when I realized, he's never going to change. I'm going to have to get divorced. But instead, I thought, before I do that, since I'm too embarrassed, I'll ask these women for their tips. What are their secrets for a happy relationship? And I thought they were going to say, well, you have to marry the right guy. And then I was going to be like, oh, yeah, he's the problem. Mm-hmm. And they didn't say that. They actually said things that didn't make any sense to me. Some of the things they said, I would be like, well, have you got anything else? I'm not going to do that. That's ridiculous. But then I became willing to try. I think it's fair to say, actually, that I was taught. I had to find my own teachers.
The book that we read was First Kill All the Marriage Counselors. Yes, but I can understand that, the difference in going to a marriage counsellor and learning how to work on your marriage compared to going to people who actually have really good marriages.
Yeah, they're the best teachers, aren't they? By example, they've got these strong marriages. Best teachers, aren't they? Have these great examples of strong marriages.
Yes,
great people to learn from.
Exactly. Turns out you can be a marriage counselor who's been divorced 3 times, has a terrible relationship. But if you've got that diploma on the wall or the certification, that's not a requirement that you have a good marriage. It was shocking, actually, to find out the things that the happy wives said that were so opposite of everything I'd been taught about relationships my whole life. But by the way, thanks for getting the joke about the name of the book. First Kill All the Marriage Counselors. I thought that was hilarious.
I thought it got me interested in it. I was disappointed you changed the name.
Did you trigger a few people, did you?
Yeah, I guess so. Well, yeah. Some people didn't get the joke. It's actually gone over Australia as a continent seemed to understand my joke. It went over really well there, but not here in the States and maybe not in the UK.
We're very self-deprecating here, so we do.
That's what it is.
We do like to take the piss out of things.
Yeah. So you were not afraid of if I kill some sacred cows. You come along with me. So yes. So The Empowered Wife was the new name, and that seems to have resonated with people. But anyway, I just thought it was fun that you got the joke. So thank you.
Yeah, nice. One of the things that was really interesting to me reading it as a man was this idea that women have the key to the marriage. In our lives, there's a pretty clear definition between what we do. We both work together. We run a couple of different businesses, and in both those businesses, we work together. But I'm the one who takes care of the work. I organize the work, I do the emails, I run all that. And Bec really runs the house. Not that we both, in the past, before we were together, Bec ran her own businesses, and I was a single father of two, and I was used to do the house. Do both, but now we've settled into those roles. It was really interesting you said about the women holding the key to the happy marriage, being like, well, hang on a second, it's got to be me in there as well. Like, it's not all about what she wants. And then I sort of sat with it and realized it actually is, because I do want to make her happy at the end of the day. How she is my prime focus. So if she's happy, then I'm happy.
I must say, I read it and I felt a lot of pressure. I was like, oh no, the pressure's on me if this, like, all the responsibilities on me if this succeeds or doesn't. And I did honestly feel a little bit stressed.
Yeah. It is stressful. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What do you feel are men's responsibility in the relationship then?
I love what you just said. I've asked thousands of men, how important is it to you that your wife is happy? And you've just sort of backed into that question and said, oh, yeah, if she's happy, I'm happy. And that's the same answer I got from every man I've ever asked. I'll say, how important is it? And they say, oh, it's the most important thing, or it's everything. Or in the UK, they say it's imperative. So all over the world, I'm finding, and in Australia, you say, if she's happy, I'm happy. I really, at this point, just enjoy so much that's how men are wired. That's who they are. And so as a husband, so I know that you try very hard to make Becky happy. And when you succeed, that's a great source of pride. And I think that's what husbands all over the world are doing. I know my husband is doing the same thing. So that is certainly an important part of it, that he's doing so much to please me. It's a big part of our success around here. I remember in the bad old days of my marriage, before I understood how he was wired, I used to just complain about things. I would say, oh, this kitchen is a disaster area. Someone needs to clean it. This is a mess. It's ridiculous. And I think he just turned up the TV a little bit so he could still hear the show he was watching over me complaining. And then finally, and I think he probably couldn't even hear I don't think people can even hear you when you're complaining, right? Especially men, right? So he just heard probably John, blah, 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 right? He didn't hear it. Yeah, the white noise. Yeah, exactly. So finally, I learned to express a desire in a way that inspires him. And I would say, I would just love a clean kitchen. I remember the first time I said it, he goes, okay. He goes, I'll clean it. And he did. And that was over 20 years ago. And he's been doing it ever since. I never do the dishes because he knows it makes his wife happy when he cleans the kitchen. He did it today. I was like, this kitchen is so clean. I'm so happy. And he goes, yep, I got to keep a clean kitchen because I know you love, I know it makes you happy. He feels good and I feel good. It's such a virtuous cycle now. And I don't hear myself complaining or nagging or screeching anymore. It's really just a great life hack to know that men just want to make us happy. And if you express a desire, they'll jump up to please you.
You mentioned there's one part in your book that talks about receive, receive, receive. And I find us who identify as women sometimes find it hard to receive because we want to mother and nurture and look after everybody. What advice do you give women so that they can be more receptive to receiving?
Yes, it's not that comfortable to receive graciously. I agree. It does feel very uncomfortable. I catch myself sometimes. I'll say, "Oh no, you sit down. I'll bring your dinner over there," whatever. Instead of receiving some offers. And I guess for me, that's really become a kind of a discipline that I focus on, is trying to be conscious of receiving gifts, compliments, help, apologies, and special treatment with just a thank you and nothing more. I have games that I do with my students. We had these Cherish for Life weekends, for example, where I give all the participants 5 of these little plastic bracelets, right, as they came in the room. And each one was to represent whether they received graciously or not. If someone else gave them a compliment over the weekend and they said, if someone said, oh, those are cute shoes. And they said, oh, these old things, I got these on sale, or I've had these forever, or whatever. He's calling you out right now.
Yep. Can't see that on the podcast, but yes, I was pointing it back as you were speaking.
I saw you throwing some shade over there.
Yeah, you couldn't have missed it.
I guess for me too, it just really became clear, like you can never get special treatment unless you're willing to receive special treatment.
And that's a great idea with the bracelets. So really shows them whether they are receiving well or not.
And then if they did receive graciously, then they could get another bracelet from another pile, not from someone else. And the person at the end of the weekend with the most bracelets got a prize for being the best receiver as a way to just practice the skill and become better at it.
Yeah, nice. That's a great idea.
I really like that idea that that learning to receive is important, and which is the opposite of that deflection of receiving, which is something which, I probably looked at Bec because I was like, oh, you say that, you did that all the time. It's really common. And I'm very appreciative, so I'm always telling her what I love and what, she's cooked an amazing meal or done something, anything. I'm always appreciative towards that. When you're appreciative, you always want that person to actually just accept it, but rather than deflect praise, is to accept praise. Because then you allow people to do that more, don't you?
So thanks, Laura. That's another thing I need to work on.
Well, and if I, now that I know, oh, sorry. Yeah. Didn't mean to bust you there.
Writing
Maybe
a list.
I did a little bit.
It's okay. I'm just writing a list as we're talking.
Yeah. Because I think of receiving now as the essence of femininity, right? This is something that men are fundamentally attracted to. And the more they can unburden us, the happier they are, the more they can compliment us, right? Like you were just saying, the more they can give us their jacket when we're cold or go get the car when it's raining, the happier they are. And then the more loved we feel. So it's such a complementary system, this whole yin and yang.
And maybe as a society, we seem to have gone too far one way where women believe that they have to be more masculine in the space. They have this sense of, I've got to hold everything together, rather than actually by reaching out. And one of the things you mentioned is about being vulnerable and allowing to receive. It is very much this, what we would look at as a feminine quality, which you don't see as often. I think maybe also depending on the person, like, before Bec and I were together, you were a single mum and you had to hold it all together and had to bring up 2 boys by yourself and be the feminine as well as the masculine.
Well, and as a society, we've kind of pushed that belief that a successful woman is a woman that's super independent, that has a career, that looks after kids and manages a house and does absolutely everything without any help. We're really kind of creating a rod for our own back. Then our man doesn't want to help us, or it's not that attractive because we're actually stepping into the male role model, basically, aren't we?
And it's so interesting because I know when I first wrote about these things over 20 years ago, it was considered very old-fashioned.
I was thinking very 1950s, isn't it?
It seemed very 1950s.
Yeah.
I think when John Gray wrote his Mars and Venus book, that was also considered old-fashioned. And then women are discovering my books now and they say, this sounds so old-fashioned. So I'm really kind of curious about whether it was ever in vogue. All seems so old-fashioned all the time, no matter when it is, right? So I'm curious about whether this is one of life's mysteries that bend our relationships unraveling. What feels the most satisfying and comfortable inside of a relationship between a man and a woman? It certainly took me many years of struggling and doing it the hard way, I would say the wrong way, in my relationship. And then once I landed on the things that I've learned, it really became incredibly very gratifying and sweet and tender and playful and passionate.
And we are wired a certain way, and I like the way that you are tapping into just the way as humans we're wired to be like this together.
Yeah, that's my experience.
We are saying, 1950s attitude. That's 70 years ago. From 1950s before, it'd probably be more like this, with the masculine has this role and the feminine has this role. And it's only been the change in the last 70 years, maybe.
I'm not sure. I'm not convinced. I think it's a lot of things we look at in the past, the halcyon days. We have a little bit of a gauze filter over it. We say, oh, back then people knew what to do, right? Or people
I
understood.
don't think they knew what to do.
I don't think they did because I remember being a little irritated with my mother and my grandmothers. I thought, why didn't they tell me this? Because surely they must have known. I don't think they knew. There were wars and there were famines and there were other things
Yeah.
going
Way
on.
bigger. Bigger than how to
Bigger
survive.
So I think,
Good
I
point.
think we're very fortunate to live in a time. I mean, there's chaos in various parts of the world, of course. Nice that we have some peace and prosperity enough to be looking at these higher level things that, we get to focus on every day.
Yeah, it's nicely
Yeah,
put.
that's true.
Yeah. You talk about the 6 intimacy skills, and that's something that we've noticed. Our intimacy podcast is quite popular, and that's something that comes up a lot for people. Can you explain the 6 intimacy skills to us?
Sure. So these are the specific actions that I learned from these other women who had happy marriages, and that when I tried them in my marriage, they worked. And that when I tried to keep practicing them on my own, I couldn't. They were so different. And I broke them down into the very specific, for me, it needed to be very practical so that I knew if I was doing them or not. In other words, if people had said things like, well, you need to just love yourself more, like I didn't really know what that meant. Did that mean I should just hug myself more? I didn't know, right? It's too vague. So the first intimacy skill is practicing, call it good self-care, but it's not the traditional definition, I guess, of self-care. For me, good self-care means I've done at least 3 things a day for frivolous fun, just to make myself happy, not because it reduces greenhouse gas emissions or it doesn't have to serve any higher purpose except for that it made me smile or laugh or feel good. I remember I signed myself up to play volleyball when I first started doing this. I thought, hey, that looks fun. I think I'd like to do that. And now I play volleyball about 3 times a week. And I just get the biggest grin on my face and, smear sand right here on my cheek usually too. And then I come home happy and my husband can't get enough when I'm filled up and happy. And it's funny, a lot of women arrive on our campus in crisis and they're saying, what can I do to fix my marriage? And we say, well, the first skill is to practice good self-care. And they're like, yeah. What do I need to do to fix my marriage? And I go, really, this is the thing. Like, trust me, we start here. Yeah. You don't have the resources to use the rest of the skills if you're not filled up and happy.
Yeah, it's that idea of filling your own cup, isn't it?
So that's your starter point.
Yeah, I like that your starter point is actually not about the other person. It's actually about yourself. In your book, you come back to that a lot, where it's not about how you can change the other person, is how you make changes in yourself. And I can see that from a masculine and a feminine point of view. Like, the more we make changes in ourselves, the more we love ourselves, the deeper we can connect to each other. Some people might say, well, how do you actually get that time? And as parents as well. So we have 4 teenagers. So,
can you give us some small examples of for people in a situation where they might have very little kids or life might be really hectic and it's hard to even go to the bathroom or have a shower without being interrupted? Can you give us some small examples of what they could do to help?
Sure. So I'm thinking of a particular student I have who had 2 small kids, 2 toddlers. She was like, you know what? There's no way. I don't see how I'm going to be able to do fun things every day because I have a 24/7 job for 2 very dependent little people. And certainly 4 teenagers. I mean, my hat's off to you. That is a lot of work also. They're also very dependent on you in ways that are different than a toddler. Anyway, as she went through the training and just got more focused on her self-care, we were talking to her at the end of the training and she said, well, I've taught my kids that if they want to have a happy mommy, that mommy gets 2-hour break every single day in the middle of the day. And the kids know they can't ask me for a hug. They can't ask me for a glass of water. They can't ask me for anything during those 2 hours. And she says, sometimes I nap, sometimes I journal. And they were happy to do it because they understood this was something they could do for mommy. And mommy was going to have this time every day and then she was going to come back. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it meant that they were on their iPads or whatever. I guess that's a controversial thing as well. But she was able to really use that time to fill herself up and stay balanced and happy. And then when her husband came through the door, she wasn't depleted on her last leg, desperate for him to take over, so she could have that break or whatever. She was already relaxed and fulfilled. So that's one example. Self-care can also be small things like even just putting lotion on before bed, staying in the shower a little extra time, making sure you have good podcasts lined up for the commute. Oh, that got a little look too. There's an inside
I do
joke
like
there.
long showers. Even grabbing a coffee, I think's a nice one too, just a takeaway coffee and a little walk, just go for a quick walk and grab a coffee for half an hour. And just to sometimes take you out of the space.
I was just noticing when I looked across before, is because that's a big part of Bec's self-care is actually to have, 2.5 hour showers.
2.5. Is that all?
Oh, that's what it seems like.
How does she get clean? In 2.5 time?
I'm glad you get our humour.
I do like the idea of actually telling the kids, I'm going to have this time. This is my time. And this is something you do for me. And I guess it's going back to before you were saying you need to express your desires to your husband. Tell them what you want. Tell everyone else what you want. Then you can act accordingly.
And maybe we're setting a good example for the next generation of kids in relationship if we do that, where we're like, we just need to take a little bit of space instead of it being all about the kids.
Yeah, where the kids become so entitled because they expect your attention all the time. They
That's
expect
right.
all the
Yeah.
things all the time.
That's right. They
Good
can
tip.
learn how to entertain themselves for a little while.
Yeah.
And it is true. You're teaching everyone else how to treat you well when you treat yourself well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like that. And so what was your second skill?
The second skill is respect. RESPECT, right? Aretha could sing it for us. And what's interesting about this one is I grew up knowing that I should be respectful to my husband. That was part of my early childhood training somehow. And I was like, I am respectful, except for the way he drives, the way he dresses, and the way he eats. And kind of my list went on and on. So I really was very clueless about what respect looked like. And I think even to this day, I'll be writing a podcast or a blog or something about respect. And I'll just think, this is so weird because I think the female brain, we just don't look at it the same way as men do. But my definition of respect these days is treating my husband as though he's capable and competent, and that I expect the best outcome from him, not the worst outcome. I was a huge fail in this in the early days because he would say, well, I think I'm going to do this. And I was like, are you sure you should do that? I thought I was just being helpful by offering maybe to be the devil's advocate about a work situation or something. And it wasn't helpful at all because he just heard it as a veiled criticism, like, oh, she doesn't think I'm smart enough to handle things like at work myself. In fact, I will tell you, to this day, I'm not perfect with this respect thing. So we were out to dinner not too terribly long ago, and we're having this nice conversation. It was like a Saturday night. It's kind of a swanky Saturday night restaurants. It's all packed, and the people are laughing at the bar, and the waiters are zipping by, and we're just having this really nice time. And then I made a comment about his work. I thought it was fairly innocent, but he got this look on his face like, and I just thought, uh-oh, something went wrong. And I wasn't quite ready to be accountable yet. So I just said, oh, was that disrespectful? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, oh. And then I thought, okay, now I know what to do. I said, oh, I apologize for being disrespectful when I criticized your client, because it really was my veiled way of saying you shouldn't give preferential treatment to that client. And he knew that. And so he goes, so then all of a sudden he smiles again, and like the music starts back up and the waiters start zipping by again and the laughter is back, right? Like everything comes back. And our good night, our good time out was saved. In the old days, that could have been a 3-day Cold War where there's no talking for days. And it's very tense at our house. We used to have that. Or else we'd have just wall-to-wall hostility and lots of bickering. And we'd both say things that were mean and horrible, I'm sorry to say. So it's just been wonderful to know how I can begin to repair things before they even really break down. By being accountable when I'm not so respectful. And I have a better idea of what respect actually looks like and how to bring that. We have all these cheat phrases that we use on our campus to just the same way you teach children to say please and thank you because you want to cultivate a grateful heart, right? So we do the same thing with various phrases that are meant to connect your heart to a place of respect.
Yeah, nice.
Wow. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
It's interesting because we actually had a conversation about this, about the fact that this bit on respect, I was like, yeah, I totally understand that. And this is not just men to women, but men to men as well. When a man's not being respectful to you, or I automatically will go on the defensive when someone's not being respectful. And we run school programs. And yesterday we were working with a group of grade 5, 6 students. So they're like probably 11, 12 years old. And there was a few of them who were just being so disrespectful. And I'd had enough. And I just stopped everything. I said, right, we're going to talk about respect right now because this is not happening. And then we came home and had another conversation about respect. And I was like, yeah, I actually expect it because I give it to everyone. And if I don't give respect to someone, then I don't expect it back. But if I'm being respectful, I expect respect back. And it's very important. And you said before, it's like oxygen. I've heard you.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, and it really is. It is something which is very important to men. You know, Bec is very respectful, but when she's not, when she's like asking me questions about something to do with work, where I'm like, no, I've got this, then straight I can feel my back go up. It's just like, what? Don't you think I'm capable or competent or whatever? So it's not going over the top about respect. It's actually that baseline of that person's an adult, that person's got their act together. Well, hopefully they do. They can manage it.
I guess the more respect you give, the more respect you get back too, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. It's interesting because I think one of the things that's come to bear for me, and I appreciate you just validating that the way I described respect really resonates for you, because I think it is a little bit foreign still to at least this female brain to describe it that way. It's interesting because I notice I have different priorities. My husband really wants to be respected. Well, I want to be taken care of. I want to feel special. I want to be adored. Like I love when he makes me laugh. Respect is not really as high a priority for me as some of these other things, feeling cherished. I see us as coming to the table with different priorities, but they're very complementary. When I'm
Yeah.
respectful, boy, he just can't do enough to cherish me. And when he's cherishing me, I feel like, well, it's so easy to be respectful. But unless I forget, and then, something else comes up or whatever. And that's where it really was all about focusing on me becoming my best self. I want to be a respectful wife. That sounds good to me. Not in the sense of like, oh, my husband's in charge of things, but just in the sense that I trust him. And I think I married him because he's the smartest guy I ever met.
Yeah, I like that. It's not about respect as in you're more important than me. It's respect as in we're equal and I want you to trust me, so I have to show trust in you. So it works both ways.
Yeah, I would say I wouldn't even say so much I want you to trust me. It's more like, yeah, see, that's where I think there's a little
Maybe
bit of
that's my masculine brain, which is
That's
like, oh
your,
yes,
that's your
it's about
masculine. Yeah,
where
that's the man
Beck's
to
Beck's
man.
not worried. Like for us, Beck's not worried about me being respectful towards her in the sense that that's not her first priority. You know, she wants me to be respectful, and she'll know straight away if I'm not. But that's probably not as high up on your priority list as it is for me.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
How about someone's in a relationship with a man who's just not respectful at all, like really disrespectful? Do you think changing your way of the partner's way of being in the space will change that other person's behavior?
I do. I think that the more you trust someone, like people tend to rise to our expectations, in my experience. And I even have this experience. So now that I teach this work and I've studied it for over 20 years, I use it in all my relationships, not just with my husband, because I understand at least a modicum, better than I used to. And I'll just notice in my business interactions that as soon as I say, even to a contractor or something like, well, whatever you think, I trust you to make a good decision on this. They just trip over themselves to make me happy, to do the best job, to really please me, to show what they're capable of, right? To like, oh, she's trusting me. I don't want to let her down. So there's a bit of a sacred trust that comes in. They want to hold it in safe hands. I consider that another, I guess, life hack that you can use to really bring out the best in others. Is some of my coaches will use it with their teenagers, because that's a time when your kids are getting more privilege and more autonomy over their own life than they've ever had. And I've seen them use that with their teenagers too. Like, well, basically, I know I raised you right? I know that you make good decisions when you're with other kids who are doing things that might be risky. I trust you or whatever. And then those kids walk away with the weight of that trust on their shoulders, it seems to get them a better response than saying, hey, don't remember, don't do drugs or whatever,
Yeah.
parents are tempted to say sometimes.
I really like the idea of that sort of life hack of being able to say to men, especially, I trust you know what you're doing. I was in India quite a few years ago, and I remember there was a guy who was packaging these books up for me. And in India, they wrap it up in like calico and sew it up to send it. And he was doing it. And I was like, oh, maybe you should do this. And he stopped and he looked at me and goes, this is what I do. And I was like, oh, good point. I'll just shut up and let you do it. And that was just that moment there where I was like, oh, actually, dude, and I didn't even think about it until now that I was actually being disrespectful to him, but I was, and he pulled me up on it. And since then, I regularly, when someone's doing something, I'll be like, "Yep, you tell me what you think. You know what you're talking about." It always gets a much better response.
You get a much better response, right? If you really want somebody to do a good job. Yeah. So that's a great example of respect.
And it really is changing the way you ask for something and the way you tell something. It's like a little bit of a shift, isn't it? You're being very respectful. You're being careful with someone else's feelings as well, aren't you?
Yeah. I know for me, there was this matter of realizing that underneath that disrespect and that desire to control was fear. I was just a very fearful person. And choosing my fear and acting on that was not getting me great results from anyone. And it didn't feel good either. Deciding like, hey, I think everything's going to be okay here, right? That was actually a big shift as well. So yeah, you make a good point. It's a shift in how you communicate, but it also changes your heart. It changes the way you look at that other person.
Yeah, nice. Tell us about
your third skill.
Skill number 3 is to stop being too helpful, we call it. So a lot of us like to be helpful. We're helpers. We unwittingly become smother mothers instead of the
smother mothers. This is an issue I have. This is definitely one of my issues.
Me too, Becky. So maybe we should samesies. To this day, I still do. Like,
oh man, I'm going to use that term next time it happens and be like, oh, look out, here comes the smother mother.
Come in, SM.
Yeah, here comes smother mother. Here comes smother mother. Yeah. Yeah. So we have. So one of the cheat phrases we use in this skill is whatever you think. I had trained my husband that he should consult me before he made big decisions like starting a business or buying a car or getting dressed. So I had to undo some training when I first began this work with the intimacy skills. And so he would say, what should I wear? Basically, and I would say, oh, whatever you think. And I mean, his head started to explode at first. I remember he was all like, has my wife been stolen by body snatchers? Because I was I was very controlling. I mean, the guy, from what he ate for lunch, like, oh, this is the wrong kind of lettuce. There's not enough nutrition in it, right? And I just had I had something to say about practically everything because I knew just about everything. And my husband is actually a very humble guy. So he's very relaxed and kind of low key. And so he just kind of was making all these accommodations. And then I thought, gosh, he just never takes initiative. He doesn't seem very manly. And I couldn't figure out why. Well, it was because I was constantly controlling.
Taking all that away from him, hadn't you?
Taking it all away. There was no room. I was controlling all the finances at that time. And I'd get so mad because I'd be like, look, you've got to pay attention to what's going on here with the finances. And now I look back, I'm like, well, how could he? Because I would say, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to put off paying this bill until we pay that bill so we can, I had it all figured out. And he was just like, okay, he wanted me to be happy. Right. So I really dug my own ditch for us to slide off into.
So don't do too much is the tip there. Don't be a smother mother.
Don't be a smother mother.
I like that.
Maybe stay in your lane.
Stay
in your lane.
Stay in your lane, because that's probably the thing is when we start trying to take care of everything. And I'm a bit of a controlling person. Like when we drive, I'm like, oh, you should turn left here and turn right there. And, we'll shave off 30 seconds on the way, which is important to me because I want to be efficient driving. But, Beck's just like, let's chat and enjoy. And there's a story in your book about the same thing, but opposite. And I thought that was quite interesting. It's like, oh, okay. There's elements of me being a smother father. So just ease up. It's not important. Stay in my lane.
Yeah.
In your book, with the 6 skills, there's things definitely for, you say this is for the empowered wife or woman, but I think also for men, there's a lot in your book to help men, because I think if we took on some of those things as well and looked at those skills and went, oh, okay, I don't need to control what Bec does, and she's cooking something amazing in the kitchen and I'm just like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And then she'll look at me and I'll be like, oh yeah, I've got no right to tell you what to do. You're making an amazing meal. I should just go back to what I was doing, which is cleaning up.
Maybe there's a sequel book in that.
A sequel, there we go.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe how the man can let the woman step into her feminine side.
Yeah, the happy husband.
The happy husband. The respected husband.
The
I don't know.
respected-
Yeah, there's something in there.
Tell us about skill number 4.
Number 4 is back to, we touched on it already. It's receiving graciously.
Mhm.
So accepting gifts, compliments, help, apologies, and special treatment. So,
Yeah, and I think that's really important, isn't it? It's so important to be able to actually just receive.
It sure is.
It's sort of like, and we were mentioning...
It's harder said than done.
It's hard to say. Well, yeah. We were talking about this the other day where we said that, when you are giving to someone but you don't accept from them, you're always giving. So you get that good feeling of actually helping other people. But when you don't receive, you stop the other person from getting that opportunity to feel like that. So it becomes a one-way thing. Yes, you're doing everything, but you also feel good about yourself. If you stop the other person from doing it, then you're stopping them from feeling good about themselves.
Yeah. It's a good point.
Yes, it's so true. And I think it's such a sign of confidence when you are a gracious receiver, right? I think that can make you more attractive. I always think of Kat Deely. I don't know if you guys have, you probably have So You Think You Can Dance. Do you have that show there?
Oh, yeah, we've heard that one.
Yeah, okay. So Kat Deely is the host of it in America, even though she's British. So maybe you have her too. I don't know if maybe she's all over the world.
She might be
But
everywhere.
she's such a great receiver. Like I remember one night she got up on the stage and she was there all glittery and beautiful. And the judges said, "Oh, Kat, you look so beautiful." And she just smiled and said, "Thank you." She really took it in under the white hot spotlight, right? And then they said, "And Kat, congratulations on your Emmy nomination." And again, she just smiled and glowed and said, "Thank you." Those judges had also been nominated for Emmys. So she could have easily deflected the attention from herself and said, "Oh, and congratulations to you too." But she didn't. And Kat Deely is so gorgeous. She just is so beautiful. And I think this is a big part of her success, that she knows how to receive graciously.
Yeah, I think that is something that I think we can work on together. Or when I say work on together, I was looking at Bec going like, I think this is something you should do.
I need to work on.
I
don't know where the together part is.
I always just take it in. I'm just like, yeah, of course, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, yes.
He is a gracious receiver.
I'm very gracious receiver. It's like, oh, compliment. Oh, I'll feed off that for a while.
Yeah, I'll take it. More, right? Well, and this leads us to skill number 5, which is about vulnerability, because receiving is a vulnerable act. Because you're not in control, especially if someone compliments your hair and you haven't even washed your hair, much less colored it, much less styled it, right? And then it's to you to decide if you're just going to take their kind words in and agree with them, at least let them land, or if you're going to argue about whether your hair is attractive or not, right? So it can feel vulnerable. And that is what we work on with skill number 5. We practice being vulnerable, because vulnerability is actually what creates fascination that leads to lifelong commitment and create intimacy and connection.
Yeah,
You've got a
beautiful.
great quote in your book about vulnerability. It says, "Vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage. Truth and courage aren't always comfortable, but they are never weaknesses." About the importance of being vulnerable. It's not easy, and we sometimes think of it as a weakness, but there's actually great courage and strength in that.
Yeah, I think Brené Brown speaks about it a lot as well, about vulnerability. And it's an interesting thing because it's something which, as a man, I would say that we are taught not to be vulnerable. We have to be very strong. We have to be very guarded. We can be attacked at any moment, physically, emotionally. But in a relationship, and I feel like with you, Bec, is that I have the opportunity to actually be able to be vulnerable, but in a masculine way, and for us to have a deeper connection because of it.
If people struggle with this, what advice would you give them? If people struggle with being vulnerable with their partner, do you have any advice for them?
I mean, I sure struggled with it too. I feel like I was raised not to be vulnerable also.
Mm.
I think because it does seem like weakness, right? It feels so awkward when you're vulnerable. So we have some more cheap phrases on this topic. So I'll give you an example of one of them. We're just sort of scraping the surface of each of
Mm.
these skills. Of course, there's more to them. But one of them is to use the word ouch. So let's say your husband makes a joke, but you don't think it was funny and it really kind of hit a nerve. One way to respond would be to say, ouch. Or it's worse than that. Maybe he's just really come out and said something totally rude for whatever reason. He's in a bad mood. And you can say, ouch, and then nothing more. For me, just two things. One is that I'm sort of staying present for Laura when I say ouch, right? I'm really kind of tending to myself instead of maybe gearing up for a battle and zinging some arrows at him, something I might have to apologize for later, which never feels good. It kind of leaves an emotional hangover, I feel like, especially if I'm disrespectful. Yeah, if I just say something horrible, that just doesn't feel good. So I stay present for me. I prevent myself from saying something rude. And then another thing that comes out of this is sometimes my husband can only hear his own conscience when I'm not arguing with him about what he just said. I'm not criticizing it.
Yeah,
I'm just
you're
saying,
not being
Mm.
pulled
ouch.
into an
Yeah, good.
argument.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
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 And so very often I get an apology. He's like, "Oh, I didn't mean to out you. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be joking about that." Or, he backpedals right away. And again, it's that sacred trust comes back and the emotional safety can
Mm.
be restored.
Yeah, that's really beautiful because it's rather
Mm.
than retaliating in anger, it's that holding it and being like, well, there's vulnerability in that, and saying, yeah, you've actually hurt me, but I'm not going to go into that. You know, and I know. So you work it out. I think as a man, I appreciate that because I think sometimes for me, I can be insensitive, and that will be, without making too many excuses, I could, my head could be full of work, or it could be full of these things I've got to do, or maybe I feel like, yeah, I'm not present in the space, and I'll say something. And if there's no retaliation, then it will just hang there. And then I can sit with it and go, oh, hang on a sec. But when there's retaliation or when there's anything, and you don't really retaliate, you don't ever try and pick a fight. Yeah, I can see how that actually is a really good way to put an end to it gently, but without letting the other person know really well that, they've actually done something wrong. I think that would be a good one to even teach our children.
Yeah.
That idea that rather than being sucked into arguments and is just to say, ouch, even bullying and stuff like that. It's just going, yep, this how it made
Yeah.
me feel, and
Yeah.
Walk away.
I walk away. I don't have to engage with this. You obviously have
Yeah.
you're not being careful with my feelings. So
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, there's power in
Yeah.
that.
I think, it does sound like a great thing to teach kids because it does strangely provide some sort of invincibility, I've decided also, because the longer I go saying ouch, the more it becomes clear like, it was unintentional, right? It was a misunderstanding. That was not my husband never intends to hurt me ever,
yeah,
right? He
Mm.
not intentionally, he doesn't hurt my feelings. It just kind of reinforces my sense of safety, and especially because I don't abandon myself in that moment when I'm feeling hurt to then go out into battle and like stab, 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 or do whatever I have to. I feel like I have to do to
yeah.
fix that situation.
So let's see. The sixth skill would be gratitude.
Gratitude, yeah. Skills underneath the gratitude topic is the spouse fulfilling prophecy. I feel like it's just indistinguishable from magic. I call it the change your husband skill. And it really starts with a complaint, whatever it is you're complaining about with your husband. We all have one. He works too much. He doesn't work enough, right? He, whatever it is,
Mm.
he spends too much time playing computer games, or he spends too much time at work, or he spends too much time, working on his car, whatever it is. We all have a complaint, and you can take that complaint and flip it upside down, because really the complaint that you have is your spouse fulfilling prophecy. It's an unwitting one. It wasn't an intentional one, but it's what you're experiencing, and it's what you're gathering evidence for. See, there he is on his phone again. I told you he's always on his phone, right? Well, no one can ever always or never be anything. So you're lying. But people don't get upset if you say he's always late, right? That doesn't feel like a lie. But if we switch it to the opposite way, we say, oh, he's never late, then it's like, oh, well, that's not true, right? So sometimes we tend to fine tune the negative
Yeah, we like
the
amplify it.
perspective,
Yeah.
amplify it, exactly. And so people will say, so I say, if he's not always late, that means he's sometimes on time, and sometimes could even be a lot of times he's on time. How about if we focus on that? Maybe he never does the dishes. Well, that one time he took his plate to the sink, that was, that's one time. So you can focus on what he's doing right and find evidence for it. I'll give you an example. In my own marriage, I used to say very often, oh, you don't make enough money. You should try to get a raise. You should try to get a better job. And my husband always heard, rightly so, that you don't make enough money. That was my spouse fulfilling prophecy. And I remember he quit his job and he wasn't making any money. And I was seething with resentment. I was so unhappy and upset about this. And then I decided I was going to change it up and start saying, you've always been a good provider. And just for fun, I thought I'm going to start calling him Mr. Moneybags. So I just very intentionally, consciously decided to make this change. And then I started gathering evidence. He was a good provider. Not all of it was financial even. I would say, look, you did the dishes. You really take such good care of me. You're such a good provider. Or, oh, look, you put gas in the car. Now he charges the car. We have an electric car. What a good provider you are. Around that time, my husband started his own company, and he had never done that before. He always worked for someone else, and he was more successful with his company than he had ever been. And maybe that's just a coincidence, but my whole experience changed when I changed my perspectives to one of gratitude and catching him doing something right instead of focusing on what he was doing wrong. And so I give all the credit to the power of the spouse fulfilling prophecy. To this day, I still call him Mr. Moneybags because he's definitely Mr. Moneybags. It doesn't feel like a stretch now at all. It did at the time, but now that is my reality. Is that my husband is a great provider and he is Mr. Moneybags.
I sort of equate that to, in some way, it's like, when you're looking for a certain type of car and then you see that car everywhere, it's what you look for, what you focus on, you draws more attention to it. It seems like it brings more of it into your life rather than, and focus on the positive rather than negative.
And nice.
Yeah.
I really like that you made it easy and turned it into this list of skills, which are just really simple. These are the things, work on these things, and this will make things better. And the fact that it is a self-focus, I feel like it's more women drag their men to the marriage counselors and the other way around. And maybe it's because that side of the relationship, that is not what I might focus on. I'm like, oh, everything seems to be all right. You seem happy. Well, let's just go about our business without realizing it. And it's when the changes start happening and, for Bec, she creates a happiness in our lives because she actually makes sure that I feel good about myself. And so I feel good about myself. So I do everything possible to make her life good as well. So it's that reciprocal.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. The virtuous cycle begins.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So
And the idea of it's a pull rather than a push, isn't it? You're sort of pulling the person towards you rather than trying to push them to do something.
what's an attraction?
Like a
It's more
magnet.
attraction.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because men, I know, I hate being pushed. It's just like, you want the worst for me? It's like trying to push me to do something. Even if I do want to do it.
We also have realized that sex is a big issue in relationships. And why do you think it goes missing in a relationship? And how do you feel people can get it back? Is it by displaying these intimacy skills in their relationship?
Well, there is a really powerful, amazing aphrodisiac for men. It's free. And I didn't ever know about it, but now I do. And it's respect.
Yeah.
Respect is such a terrific aphrodisiac. So when this physical intimacy has gone missing, that's the first thing that we take a look at. How is the respect level? Or the other thing is back to that smother mother idea. Men are not sexually attracted to their mothers. And if that's who we remind them of, if we're doing their laundry, making their doctor's appointments, packing their lunches, doing all the things that mom used to do, even being too helpful, making helpful suggestions, then that can really, and mothers are not sexually attracted to their sons either.
Yeah.
So really can go away on both
That's true.
sides.
Good
Right?
point. Yeah.
That's a very good point. Yeah, we do
Yeah,
step into
so
that motherly role very easily.
now that I've had the privilege of helping tens of thousands of women restore the physical and emotional, spiritual intimacy in their marriages, really remarkable to see how quickly things can come back when she has the right skills
Can
and she knows
spark
what to
back up.
do and she's
Yeah.
not just walking around in the dark.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. And I think that bit about expressing your desire as a woman, like this is saying exactly what you want. I do think that because women can actually read each other's minds very, really well, they can look at each other and go, oh, I know exactly what you're thinking. I know what that look is. I know what that expression is. That women sometimes believe that men can do that. But we don't do that. We don't look at your face to work out what's going on. We're generally listening to hear what's going on,
Yes.
but we don't, even each other, like men don't look at each other in the face and take facial cues from each other. We don't even grow up like that. You can see the difference. If you walk into any primary school or high school and all the girls will be sitting around in a circle having conversation, all the boys are sort of chasing a ball in different directions. We don't grow up with the facial cues, so we don't have the ability to read minds like women do. But sometimes we are expected to read minds. We're like, oh, I'm supposed to know what's going on inside their head. We have no idea. And so when this is what I want, this is how I feel, this is what's going on for me, then it's like, oh, good. I know what to do with that. You know, it's something tangible I can do with rather than me trying to work it out. Oh, something's wrong. I'm not too sure what it is. She just seems mad at me. What have I done? I'll go through all the list of all the things. That's just exhausting. That makes life hard as well.
Especially if we say everything's fine. No, everything's fine. You really know you're in trouble.
So obvious it's not fine.
So this is, that's the way I communicate with men, isn't it? By being really clear. Do you have any other good tips for communicating with men?
Well, the only other thing I would say is that, I'm on a mission to end world divorce. That's my mission now because it's so heartbreaking to be in a struggling marriage. And I just don't want any other woman to suffer because she doesn't have the right information or the right support. And having the right information is a great start. And for me, I couldn't do it until I started making my girlfriends do it with me. And I had a little support circle. And so that's why I have a coaching organization now. We have a community and we all sort of practice these skills together. What is it they say? If you hang out at the barbershop, you're going to get a haircut, right? So it's nice to have the accountability of your peers who are like-minded to help keep you focusing on the things that you want to be experiencing because what you focus on increases. I guess I just want to say that if just hearing the list of skills doesn't change your marriage immediately, or if the skills don't seem to be working for you. I know for me, getting support was just huge. That made a big difference. Hearing myself say things out loud, having other women point out my blind spots where I couldn't see that I was being very controlling still, even though I said I wasn't, to really want to offer that encouragement. And I think when women come to our campus, a lot of times they think their marriage is terminally unique, right? That they are in such a crisis, there's such a state that there's no help for this. To paraphrase Thomas Wolfe, miracles not only happen, they happen all the time. We see marriages, like the phoenix sort of rising from the ashes of the old marriage and becoming the one she dreamed of when she said, I do. I just want to make sure that if you're listening to this, that you get the message that there is just tremendous hope, no matter how hopeless it seems right now.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's a beautiful message.
Laura, what does the course look like at your campus and can people do it online?
Well, right now I have something kind of fun going on. We have a free Adored Wife roadmap that you can get at lauradoyle.org. You can go and just download the Adored Wife roadmap, which also includes the 3 things that wives commonly do, the mistakes they make trying to get his time, attention, and affection. So that's a great place to start and get connected.
Great. I'll put that link in our show notes. A lot of what we've been talking about has been very heteronormative. How about for couples who are in different types of relationships? So, we're talking gay and lesbian couples.
So, of course, everyone deserves to be in an intimate, passionate, peaceful, playful relationship. I just set out to save my own marriage. That's all I was trying to do in the beginning. And so everything I do is based on my experience in this relationship with a man and a woman. And so I'm a little bit limited in that regard. That's all I have to share. Not to say we haven't had students of all stripes saying that they want this. We're always happy to help anyone who feels strongly that relationships, especially marriage, is important, because it is.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for chatting to us this morning. Or this afternoon.
Or this afternoon where you are.
Thank you.
Take care, Laura. Thank you so much.
So lovely to meet you.
Too.
See you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
So thanks for listening. And we've been talking to Laura Doyle, who's the author of The Empowered Wife.
Please listen to our upcoming episodes where we look at some more books based on helping you with your intimacy and in your relationships, and hopefully talking to a few more authors as well.
See you next time.
See ya.
Thanks for listening. Please subscribe and follow us.
And check out our website at rekindlingrelationships.com.
Bye for now.
See ya.